everybody, and welcome to Conversations in American Democracy. Today is Wednesday, June 18th. I am Kathy Ritondo. I am here leading the discussion today because Merrill has an important engagement for the anniversary of the rabbis who were arrested en masse, and they celebrate the day annually in St. Augustine. Welcome back to our podcast. Hopefully you'll be liking and subscribing and sharing with like-minded friends. Today's order of business will be Curt McCauley is going to lead us in conversations about how and when and how the Constitution was organized. From there, we're going to head over to Mark, who's going to talk a little bit about what's happening locally on the board of directors, council, sorry, for Palm Coast. And then we're going to swing over to Susan, who has something she'd like to talk about, No Kings. Okay. All right, so we're going to start with Curt, who has a glorious history in teaching history, and he's going to talk to us about the Constitution of the United States.
So, why the Constitution? Why do we have one?
Limit the government. Limit the power of the government.
Yeah, okay. So basically what I'm going to explain is, and what we all know, or hopefully we all know, the ground rules, or, the organization of the Constitution and how we govern ourselves, right? All right, so why the Constitution? We won the revolution in we didn't, it was like 1781 when Yorktown happened, and we found ourselves in a country. And we didn't really know what to do. And so it moved from there to what the whole problem is. We had 12, not quite 13 states or 13 colonies, and whether or not we would give them, how much power we would basically give them. And so we came up with the Articles of Confederation, which gave a lot of power to the states. And this is an ongoing thing, right? Everybody understands that the yin and yang of the states versus the federal government, and where the power flows and who gets it. Everybody understand that? Okay, all right. So we adopted in like 1781, right after we established the United States with the Declaration of Independence, right? We all understand that, and that's we the people, and the other we the people, because the Constitution says we the people too. Okay, so what transpired right away was, I'll give you a little context too. What were the main ways of taxing the people in the old days?
Tariffs.
Well, that eventually came, but it was something else. Something that a lot of us do. We drink alcohol, right? Alcohol was the main source of taxing. And I could even go further, but I don't know. What was the alcohol?
Rum?
Beer.
Well, that was all part of it. No, beer didn't come for another 100 years.
Wine.
No.
Tea.
Whiskey.
Johnny Appleseed.
Cider.
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 Cider was the main
Cider
source
was
of that.
alcohol.
And that's the reason why Johnny Appleseed said, go west and plant the seeds. Anyway, that's how the government made money up until the 1880s. Okay? So anyway, so what it was at that time was the Whiskey Rebellion. You've all heard about it.
On that point, might want to take a look at Whiskey Rebels. Really great book by Robert Harris. I remember that we had one paragraph in high school that a bunch of people didn't want to pay their tax on whiskey, and we sent some feds out and made them pay. But the history and the story behind the Whiskey Rebellion is fascinating.
Yeah.
Whiskey Rebels, I really recommend it.
Well, so it wasn't really cider, but it was cider. It was cider, but whiskey was a big thing. And of course, that one was really in Pennsylvania.
I'm sorry, it was David Liss was the author, and it was whiskey because this happened because I can't go into too much detail. It's a book, but a bunch of hardcore guys went out west in Pennsylvania, and they didn't know whether their script from the government. They were vets. They didn't know whether their script from the government was going to be worth anything or not. And some smart guys found out early that the government was going to cover the script, and it was going to be good dollar for dollar. But that news wasn't out yet. And these guys went to the vets and said, "We'll take your script and we'll give you this great land out in western Pennsylvania," which is basically run by the Indians at that point in time. And so the vets did it. And a bunch of pretty rough guys went out there. The land was very fertile, but the government provided them nothing. No roads, no defense against the Indians and whatever else. They had great wheat crops and couldn't get them to market. And they were rotting and so forth, and they didn't know what to do. And so they fermented it and they made whiskey. And that became their medium of
Barter.
Instead of barter, it became their
Money.
Currency.
at that point in time. And then the federal government said, "Oh, look at that! They're making some whiskey out there. We should tax that." And these guys said, "Tax
They
this."
want that thing.
You know, exactly. And it was a very complicated, beautiful story. But as Curt said, it was based on whiskey. Sorry.
Let me add something about the whiskey. They put it into barrels, right?
Right.
Yes.
And it's an investment. They don't have to sell it right. They can sell it when they want it, as the market price would be and everything. So it's just 60 Minutes had a whole thing on barrels the other night.
Well, they had a whole thing on, actually middlemen are buying the barrels that are sitting and actually investing it through the stock market.
Right,
The
right.
price of the whiskey in the barrel based on year of return.
Right.
So it's become an economy all the time.
That's how everything circles back.
Wow.
To the whiskey.
What's old again is new again.
Okay, so I can basically ask you this: how is the Constitution setting up the government?
Well,
And
that's our
I know
question
the
to
first
you.
three, the first. There's 7 basic.
Branches, right?
The three branches.
Three branches.
All right,
Sure.
that's
Balance
one,
of
yeah.
power.
And what are they?
Executive, legislative,
and
and
judicial.
judicial.
Judicial. Okay. Okay. Now, Article 4 is the full faith and credit of the government. So once they put the government in place, it's voted on and is accepted by everybody. And you realize that I'm talking about there's delegates coming from 12 colonies, not 13, but 12. And basically they're sent as individuals representing their colonies to vote on this. And
Okay,
that's,
wait, so we do roll it back a second, and how did they decide and account for who sends what to vote?
well,
Representatives versus the.
there are lots of subcommittees, committees, and you know, and so they would do it just the way our committees do it now.
No, I'm talking about how did they decide how many people to send? And you know, 2 from every state for Congress and then Senate, and how that would unfold.
I don't have that history, but there was uneven numbers from different states, and there were 37 of them. I think it's 37 that I counted. 36 delegates from 12 states, and it was not an even number like New Hampshire had 2, and
What happened to
Massachusetts.
the 13th state?
That came later.
Later.
That came later.
Even though there were 13 colonies to begin with?
Right.
I'm curious why they shut one.
I think it's Delaware.
Delaware was the first one to ratify.
Delaware was the first.
First to ratify?
They were the
Yeah.
first.
I thought it wasn't Delaware.
No,
I think Florida was last.
No, Florida
Florida was way out of the picture.
1890. Florida didn't
13
become a
colonies.
state
No.
until
Yeah, that's what I'm
1890.
saying, it probably was the last one, the one that was
No.
left out.
Was it a distance thing? Was it so far out?
Well, distance was always a problem because they had to ride horses or
Sure.
take carriages. Yeah, so distance was always a thing.
Or was there maybe two areas that were all so closely aligned that they felt comfortable sending someone from like New Hampshire?
Well, blocks
or-
formed and broke up, you know, as alliances formed about the values or what they were
Could
trying
they
to
have
do.
made the Carolinas one instead of two?
No,
No?
because South Carolina's been a thorn in the federal government's
Since the
backside for a
beginning.
long time. The famous nullification, remember South Carolina nullification? This is the yin and yang between powers of the state and the government, right? And they really had no idea that they could ever create a government as strong as what we have today. Because you realize the power has flowed all the time to the federal government.
I don't think they wanted to create a federal government that's as powerful as it is today.
No, no one does. It's, you know, but
They didn't want it to have an army.
power abhors a vacuum. And if you don't stand up and make yourself heard and the whole thing, then the other people will seize it, right?
Originally, the federal government had limitations. The states eventually just gave them more and more and more power, unfortunately.
And more money with the
Yeah.
taxation.
Yeah.
It's always about the money.
Okay, so we got to full faith and credit. Then there's Article 5 is the amendments situation. How do we amend the Constitution? And then, of course, Article 6 with previous debts. Any debts owed by the government or assume as they were forming the government, then the government accrued those debts. And then, of course, the last thing was a ratification. All right. So, let me just read a brief statement here. The U.S. Constitution, oh, God.
Well, I was gonna say, how you doing that without something?
The U.S. Constitution lays the foundation for American democracy, organizing government into 3 co-equal branches and outlining the powers and responsibilities of each.
Actually, the judicial was not a very strong portion of it for a number of years after it.
Right.
They met in a basement room somewhere.
What was that amendment? Famous amendment. Marbury versus
Yes.
Madison,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because Madison was the big writer of the Constitution.
Is that
Madison and
James
Jefferson,
James
yeah.
Madison?
And
Okay.
that was,
Everybody-
that was the law that gave the court the ability to declare a law unconstitutional.
Constitution, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay, so,
This is
Oh, wait.
making me wanna take a history class again. It really is. I'm like, brush up on all this stuff that I must have known at one point.
The knowledge.
All right, you gonna
Never
keep
forsake
reading?
the teacher.
Read.
okay, written the framework, the First Amendment stands as the cornerstone, and that's what we were gonna talk about today, if we have time, if you wanna go into it. You know, and the first 10 amendments are the basic, what?
Original.
Freedom of speech, freedom to assemble,
Yeah,
freedom of
Bill
religion.
of Rights, First Time Amendment.
That's the First Amendment, but
Yeah,
what are the
that's
first 10 amendments relative to all our?
We gotta look it up.
They have a description of that. Come on.
The name of them?
Yeah, the first
Yeah,
10 amendments.
The Bill of Rights.
Bill of Rights.
Bill of Rights.
There it
Okay,
is.
there we go. I was just gonna say that.
Yeah.
But they're separate documents, are they not? The Constitution is one document which limits the power of the government, and the Bill of Rights is what specifically spells out.
No,
the rights
the
of
Bill of Rights is,
people.
the Bill of Rights is the
part.
first 10
10
amendments.
amendments.
It's the first, you can amend the Constitution, you can change it, or you can limit it. And the first 10 changes are called the Bill of Rights.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Versus the.
First Amendment stands as the
It's not a separate
cornerstone.
document, it's part of the Constitution.
I understand.
Oh, okay.
I just thought that one had one purpose and one had another.
No,
One
together.
spelled out what the government couldn't do, and one spelled out what the people, what their rights were. That was, but I'm,
Well, it's basically the same thing
Right,
because
it's
they
just
want, you know.
other words of explaining what is the case.
That was news to me.
Right.
Or clarification, I mean, I understand the structure of the Constitution is a standalone document discussing and understanding, and then there were specific issues that they hammered out for years
For citizens.
of those amendments that were added to clarify specific issues. And the first 10 of those are called the Bill of Rights because they're directed toward the rights of citizens.
They want to get that out of the way, and I think it was very important. I think we all agree. That's one reason why we value the Constitution, right? That essentially, the first 10 amendments spoke to us. What we could do and what we could ask for.
No, the first 10 amendments spoke to what the government cannot do.
Well,
They're all all of them are.
Government shall not restrict. X,
Exactly.
Y, Z.
They all limit the government's power.
like protecting essential freedoms like speech, religion, assembly, and petitioning.
Well, you remembered all that, Kathy. You got it all.
Together, they ensure a balance of power and a government accountable to its people. Principles that continue to guide and shape the United States today. Okay?
Which a lot of people have forgotten.
Yeah, so I'm saying, I really,
So,
really
Curt,
want to brush up.
question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the founding fathers in their construction of this document foresaw or planned or hoped that it would be deemed a living document and very pliable and subject to change as society, technology, or anything they couldn't foresee to change?
Well, our
Well, that's-
16th president spoke to that,
That's
right?
the
Didn't Lincoln
argument
talk about
today.
Argu-
The
Lincoln
originalists
spoke about that.
versus the people who believe that it's a living document and changes with our evolution.
But our current originalists don't really want to go back to the original document because if Clarence Thomas put it all the way back to the beginning, he wouldn't be on the Supreme Court and he'd be killed for having married a white woman.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, but I don't know, was that in the Constitution?
Yeah.
As
He
far
he
as,
had no rights. He would have been a slave. He had no rights back then.
3/5 or whatever they call themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he
Well, that
still had
came
no
in
rights. He
Dred
was
Scott.
counted 3/5 of a human being, but he had no rights.
You know, Lincoln was.
He
the
was like
16th
cattle.
Lincoln was the 16th president. And so if this notion about the Constitution was that it was is it a fluid document, is that when it changes? Was still very much relevant when Lincoln made one of his addresses about always working towards forming a more
Perfect union.
Perfect union.
So I wonder, Lincoln being a lawyer and all that, if this wasn't like a main topic, that was studied and taught at the higher levels in the universities and things to people that, because I imagine that they had the document and then moving forward, they probably just studied it, always studied it.
You mean like this?
Like that.
It started out like this?
Yeah.
Nice and clean, and they've done a job
I
on
wonder
it?
if that wasn't from the original people that knew these people that were part of forming the Constitution. It just kind of kept coming down like that. Like this was their attempt, to keep it changing and evolving.
The question
You're
being,
saying the founders?
Well, you get into the whole interpretation thing.
Yeah.
Like, they're words. So what do the words really mean? They mean something to me, they mean something different to him, they mean something different to you. And we're still going through that today. What does it mean? There's pick any 10 words. What do those 10 words really mean? And that's why you have lawyers. To try and interpret
Right.
what those words mean, and
Right.
you have disagreements on just about anything you want to pick. You can have a disagreement or an agreement on. That's where we are today, is trying to interpret a document that is hundreds of years old.
My
Well,
father.
Part
I
of
think you
that
give
problem
a
is
lot of
people
people too
want
much credit.
to interpret it differently.
Yes.
Rather than
yes.
taking it literally for what it says, they want to change it to their point of view.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's wrong.
That's right. Because
But then-
it'll only bend so much.
I would push back that literal words can mean something to you, it means something to me.
Well, that's because we want it to be that way.
Exactly, and so there has to be somebody to call time out, but then who's right and who's wrong?
Kathy wanted
That's
to say
Oh,
something.
when you were talking about how they look at every little thing, My father was an English teacher, and he was one time paid $600 to go to court to diagram the sentence to show that the adjective and the insurance company lost because they didn't know the grammar.
I mean, there are so many 2- and 3-letter words in our language that can alter the meaning drastically of anything. But there have been great minds studying this.
I run into a lot in conversations with my daughter, who's a lawyer. She'll say, well, wait a minute, a lot, right? Well, that's not, it's like, concrete example was this Brad Lander, I think his name is, the guy that ICE manhandled in New York.
Oh, right.
He's running for mayor. And my daughter, who lives in New York City, is a big fan of his. And so she texted me this link to interview he had, and I texted her a link back to an interview with Hochul, the governor of New York, who was defending Lander, and she was really good. But anyway, my daughter said that Lander's actually wrong about they need a warrant. They don't need a warrant. Once the game was, and it's really interesting for those that don't know, I'm here from Haiti or someplace, right? I go to the judge, and the judge says, case dismissed. Well, now I'm fair game. And that's why Lander was there in the first place, because as people had their cases dismissed, the Proud Boys wearing masks would pull them out and send them away and hold them for immigration. And so Lander was going to link arms with some of the people that were that he knew to try and protect them from the scam that's going on. I mean, it's really dastardly what is actually happening right in front of our eyes. I mean, I don't know where it's all going to end, but it's just not right.
No.
I mean, it's just not.
Do you think where it's going to end will be when it really starts to affect us economically?
I think it there's always, unfortunately, I can't see any way that 25 or 30% of the population of this country is going to wake up. I wouldn't say woke, I'll say wake up. It's just not going to happen. And so, will the 70% be strong enough to put an end to this silly stuff? You know, I don't know.
No, I agree with you. There's a large portion that will never see the truth.
Never.
They just are so embedded in the lie,
Right.
they just can't fathom the truth.
They can, I won't get into.
I think we're straying. I think we're straying.
Yeah, I know, but
We are.
a lot of people will never admit they're wrong.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, you know.
So, Kurt,
Sorry, Kurt.
No, that's all right. This is the way that the whole Constitution.
Well,
we have to hammer it out. We have to hear each other out, and
So while we're on the subject of Lander, I listened to an interview that he gave, and actually the two people that were detaining him were both immigrants themselves, as opposed to Proud Boys.
The irony.
The irony, yes.
yeah.
but I imagine the constitutional construction that they spent years working on is very similar to each state as a representative wanting their protectionism or their words or whatever was going on. You know, the Second Amendment, the only purpose within the historical of that was that the states wanted to make sure that each of them had the rights to arm and have militia because against other states. Anybody, they wanted, like what we have exactly going on now, where the federal government went in to California and took over the state's militia. If you use the terms out of the Second amendment and the other amendments that talk about the freedom and the ability for the states to have the control over their own protectionism, as if it will, right? So it's ironic that in the Second Amendment, they're all for everyone bearing arms, but as far as the 14th Amendment of the birthright rights of an individual being born, they're against it. Well, do you believe in the document or not? You know, do you support, or do you just cherry pick it at your own?
That's
Susan
exactly what
wants,
they-
Susan
I
wants
have
this.
a question, because now it seems like a lot of this is really relying on the courts and ultimately the Supreme Court.
So far.
Okay, so Supreme Court nominations are nonpartisan?
No, that's not true.
Here's why
But
I
it
speak
should
to
be.
that.
Just
Should
the,
be, yeah,
just
just
the
because
Here's
they
opposite.
why I
should be.
speak to that, because I think ideally they're supposed to be nonpartisan. But since we all know that that's the elephant in the room and that's not really what's happening anymore, would it be wise for us to actually make them partisan? Like, let's just put it all out on the table, you know? We know this one is conservative, we know this one is liberal.
I'm confused about the idea that nominations for the Supreme Court are supposed to be nonpartisan.
I didn't know, I didn't think that.
They're nominated by the president.
By the president.
Well,
yeah.
He's partisan.
Well, the problem though, is
can't
that
they-
it can be partisan or nonpartisan, but person that goes up to be on the Supreme Court of the United States will lie in your face to get that nomination.
Yeah, oh, we've seen that.
So if somebody gets the nomination to be a Supreme Court justice by lying, what good are they?
But it is interesting
That's the reason why they're 9.
Pardon?
that at this point they're not. There have been less and there have been more
Right.
during
Yeah.
the fluid. But it's ironic there was, and I'm gonna hate to say this, Ted Cruz, who's a pretty damn good lawyer and actually stood in front of the Supreme Court multiple times, presented an argument, and it's borne out to be true, that over the life of a Supreme Court justice, they eventually lean liberal in their decisions over time. Now, there are exceptions like we have right now, but over and over again, and I'm talking about going back 150
Historically,
years.
that's accurate.
Historically, because in his mind, and in many minds, the intent of the Constitution and the first 10 article, the Bill of Rights, were intended to minimize the impact, control the government, and to empower the states, are surprisingly all kind of left-leaning, in today's world's views of things. Have the government stay out of it, let us do whatever we want. So over time of jurist decisions on things that are made over the long period, which is why they have lifetime, and most judges have lifetime commitments, which is a whole nother argument that they.
Are people having this discussion about how to get this more balance in our judiciary? Since everything is now kind of, you know, wow, it's going to the courts now.
Yeah.
These things are ending up in the courts on a constant basis. So we're at a pinnacle, I think, where whoever's on these courts, we need to be able to trust them. We know we're losing a lot of faith in
Yeah,
our
so term limits
judiciary.
might be the
We
next
need-
conversation we need to have.
Yes.
Well, it needs to be more than term limits. It ought to be 50-50 between men and women. It should represent every major group in the United States. Where's the Native American on the Supreme Court? Where's the Asian American on the Supreme Court, okay? That needs to be fixed. And whoever is the head of the Supreme Court should rotate every year or every 2 years
Well,
so
if
that
we
not one party is
If we
in
had a
charge of
Native
it.
American Supreme Court justice, they would be overrepresented because they're not 1/9 of the American population. So it would be, it's not, wouldn't be.
He's talking about the numbers of.
Well,
varieties
excuse
of
me, they were
success.
here freaking first.
So?
Yeah.
And we
We
have done
can say that
nothing
about,
but
we can say that in
trample
every
their
single
rights.
country in the world,
But
that they
they-
displaced somebody that was there first.
I know, but we have trampled their rights continuously,
I'm
and we
not saying
still
that
are.
I'm not saying they shouldn't be represented.
Yeah, I know, but
But
we don't let
getting
them
one from
vote.
each group will give us a very large court.
But it is interesting.
You know, you could keep it to 9. You could keep it to 9 and try to do as much as you can to represent the public. You know,
And why should the court be limited to 9? I'm
It
not
doesn't-
saying it
during-
should be.
I think right now it should be around 25.
They tried to
At
get Joe
least.
Biden to make it 13, but he wouldn't do it.
Right.
Why do we
So-
want it smaller?
No,
No.
13 is
Larger.
larger.
Larger than
But
that.
why are we keeping it smaller? That's my question.
That's a good question.
Well,
Because
because,
it's a slippery slope. I'm sorry, Mark.
no, to increase the
Please.
number.
Yeah.
Speak to that, I'm curious, really.
Well, look, for a long time we had a court that leaned left, and a long time, and the conservatives had to deal with that, and now we have a court that leans right, and we're having trouble dealing with that, and we're saying. I'm not saying that the times it's equal, but again, I'm very much against these false equalities. What's happening now is very, very different. But if you wanted to increase the number of the court so you could put some of your people on it every time you didn't like the complexion of the court, it would be a problem.
That's not, I'm not saying that, and I don't think that should be there. I think it should be bigger so it's more representative.
but it
You have
becomes
greater
like a committee.
representation.
It becomes like a committee, and then you can't get anything out the other end.
Yeah.
You know,
Wouldn't it
that's.
always be the majority, what do they call decisions? Is this what they write? They write decisions?
Well,
Wouldn't it always boil down to a majority?
Yes.
If the country lasts long enough, some of the current decisions will be overturned by future Supreme Courts.
Oh, I think almost everything these people are doing is going to be
Well,
overturned
there are-
because.
I mean, historically, the Supreme Court does overturn itself when you have a new.
But we've
Supreme
never
Court.
had a court that was proven to be as corrupt as this one.
You're right.
Where you have people like Leonard Leo that, you know, have poured millions of dollars into supporting
Well,
not just the justice, but his mother, his nephew, his whatever, and now it turns out he has all these relationships with Scali as well.
And let's don't get started on Thomas.
So Kurt,
Well, he was
when,
that who was-
when did the Supreme Court first get seated? Do you remember?
Well, it's 1799, and it was Marbury versus Madison,
And
that whole policy.
Where did those, do you know how many there were? And how were they selected?
There was 5.
Yeah, it was
And
fine.
how were selected? By the representatives in the room? By the president?
No,
I
the
think they're the
president.
president.
president
They're pretty
chose
sure
them,
it's the
right?
president.
So George Washington or whoever after him
Yeah, well,
had
it started
selected the.
Started with Washington,
Five.
I
yeah.
don't believe that the Supreme Court started at 9, I think it started.
Five.
Five.
She said
Five.
five.
It's five.
Okay.
My brother was a lawyer. I had to read a lot.
So it
about
is
the Supreme
interesting,
Court.
it is interesting, we, as conservative liberals, are relying and hoping that our last bastion of protection of what's going on is relying on the courts, which are selected by the partisan process
That-
at the federal level, all the way up and down. From the first federal that gets selected by the president to the Supreme Court that gets selected by the president, and none of them have term limits. They're all
And I'm not
they're all
saying this
lifetime.
because it's gonna
And
end the
to somebody's point a while ago, when they're going through their confirmations and they lie through their teeth for those 3 that Trump put in, all of them saying that they would support president, and then they all of them throughout the
Right.
right to a woman to have an abortion.
Sure.
So they all lied to us.
And Brett Kavanaugh?
Well, this is the
yeah,
Federalist
the
Society.
drug,
This is
yeah.
the Federalist Society and their,
Mike Allen.
and their pressure on the legal
But
profession.
in the past, history has shown that it was the executive, the elected bodies that have been the roadblocks. If you look to as far back as Nixon,
You know, I
his
remember-
own party came and went to him and said, "We don't have your back, dudes. You're a mess. Get out, leave." Which really makes me read that email you sent me about the internal actions of here locally in the same view of how the Republican Party here locally is fed up and struggling with the mayors, trying to get them removed on their own.
We'll get to that in a minute.
But-
I just want to say one more thing. How are we going to proceed in future meetings to break down the Constitution? What's your vision for that?
Well, I wanted
I wanna
to
wrap this
handle
end
the
up.
First Amendment today, but maybe what we
I
should do.
don't think we have time for that.
No, we don't. So we'll go on and then we'll do the Second
We'll break
Amendment.
down the amendments.
And
Okay.
maybe the Third
We'll work
Amendment.
through them.
Yeah.
I love that idea. Thank
Yeah.
you for doing this. I really appreciate that.
Would it be possible to even raise that a little more and know that there are amendments that are under attack right now going through the courts?
Mhm.
That we could pick some of those to educate ourselves?
Mhm.
Because I find in conversations, a lot of people don't understand the 14th Amendment and
No.
the birth or citizenship
Right,
right.
right.
And it's been bastardized and confused. Or the right of a fair trial, which has been going on, and understanding that
Due process.
how many
Due process,
times in the
yeah.
last 3 weeks have I had conversations with people that said they're not a citizen, so the Constitution doesn't apply to them.
If you're
That's
in
a
this
great
country,
That's
it
just,
applies.
that's just wrong.
It's
Yeah.
back to.
But it's
That's why so many
interpretation.
people want to get here.
Comment from the bleachers.
Joanne,
Just point out to that person, that would mean that someone who wasn't a citizen could come here and kill someone, and we couldn't prosecute them because
Right.
they don't fall under our law.
Joanne?
So to keep up with what's going on in Congress and the courts, there's a email you can get, govtrack.us. And you get one like once a week, and it tells you all the happenings for the Congress, both parties, both
That should be a
sections.
short list.
And-
That's
Well,
exactly.
this one is short because there's a light schedule for Congress. But other times it is much more lengthy, and they do, I believe, cover the court cases too. If this one doesn't do it, I'm sure there is another one that will inform everybody what's going on a weekly basis with an email. And Heather Cox Richardson spoke to that you were talking about a minute ago, and I'm trying to remember, when the Nixon thing was, she considered it quaint, comparatively speaking.
Mhm.
And a lot of people read her, and she's also live every week on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yesterday, she pre-recorded, knowing she was busy and couldn't do it at the usual time. But every Thursday afternoon at 6 p.m., she does a
Very
live.
smart person.
And she
Well, I get her stuff.
provides
Some
a
amazing
wealth of
information.
accurate information, being
You should
a
interview her.
professor.
Yeah.
I wish. But anyway, I'll just make that suggestion.
Sure.
If we could tie in
Mhm.
events that we may have discussions with family members or other people that are confused or don't understand. Because I guarantee you at this table, there's a lot of interpretation about that. I carry my book around and read it all the time, and I get confused on how it's interpreted. So thanks.
yeah, well, we'll go to the 14th Amendment, the last.
Because they're gonna
the last
rule on
date.
that in the next, by the end of the month, supposedly.
Yeah.
And they have been known to push some really hard ones beyond the end of the month, but it's supposed to be, if you go to Democracies with Mark Elias.
yeah.
He's doing a weekly update of all the things that are happening and what's coming in the future and decisions around the world, or around the states, because right now, that is the one thing that we're all hoping for, to keep some type of guardrail that's going on, so.
Yeah. Well, my whole history in this was that in 1972 and 3, when Watergate was going on, I was graduating from college. My father was a lawyer, and I was slated for law school. But Watergate, I tell people in one word, I didn't go to law school because of Watergate. And how many lawyers went to jail? Do you know this? Went to jail.
Sure.
How many?
I don't know how many, but it was.
It was 33.
33.
33 went to jail.
Those days are gone.
Well,
you
it's
know
never
what?
the criminals that go, it's always the people they used and abused that go.
And then you know the main laws that they broke? Was lying. Was
Perjury.
lying for Nixon.
Perjury, yeah.
So,
Well, and that's the same thing happened in the first term with Trump.
Mm.
The colony that was not included in the 13, it was in the 12, was Georgia.
Georgia.
Georgia, right,
Okay.
right, the famous, if I can think of him, but I can't think of him right now.
Named
I
after
guess
the illustrious
you
king.
consider them a peach.
Okay, on that note, we're gonna swing over to Mark, who's gonna give us a little update about what's happening with the city council here in Palm Coast. Mark, by the
The
way,
drama-
has his own podcast, Ponderings from Palm Coast. Little plug right there.
And this week I had my producer, Al Ritondo, on it.
Mhm.
Phenomenal conversation about a lot of things, highly recommend taking a look at it. I attended the city meeting with my good friend Mark Stancil. We sat there in amazement and watched the slow wheels of our city council rolling over as many rights and responsibilities and things that were presented. There were a lot of issues that came up. They're aggressively trying to raise the impact fees to generate more money because the city is in debt and going further into debt. And I don't know if you guys know, but the city was pleading with the governor to provide as much money as possible to help us with our water. We were looking for $100 million. We got 5. And we don't believe, a lot of people don't believe that that will even survive his veto pen coming up in the next couple weeks. So there's no hero coming. There's no state money coming to help us with our 500, who knows how much
So we gotta
million.
get that $11.2 million back from Staley is what we need then.
Mhm.
That was on my agenda, but I did not get a chance to bring that up. It's the beginning of June. All the city council meetings from here on out and all the conversations are going to be budget driven because they have to have a budget set and ready to go by September because our budget runs October to September. Multiple people sitting on the city council right now have never done a budget at this. Our annual budget is somewhere around $360 million.
I thought it was more like 435.
Yeah,
The
well,
last
that's
number
over
I got was
400.
3,
I
that's
know
what it
it's
was in 2024,
But it's over
2025.
400 this.
Yeah, so.
Wow.
The point is, they desperately need, and they're starting to talk about how and where they're gonna find the juggling act of funding without raising our millage rates, which is our property taxes. But people don't seem to understand, they'll double your water, right Kathy? But then leave your property tax alone. That doesn't do you much good if you're sitting in an apartment to where you're paying water, but you're not paying any property taxes. So they did discuss, and they are on the final step of approving the paint colors, which I was trying to figure out how much money in the last 3.5 years the city has spent in reaction to one individual and their paint issue, and it's still not gonna be resolved for that individual. She's not gonna be grandfathered, and who knows how that's gonna be, but it was ironic if you go and listen to our mayor's very pointed views of, we live in a free society, people should be able to do what they want. Paint your house however you want, grow your chickens, do whatever, we got bigger issues. Don't know if I don't disagree with parts of that conversation.
Moderation.
But there was something that caught my eye I wanted to share because I'm very suspicious that the city council has its own agenda, surprise.
Oh, yeah.
And that not much of what we see, if you go and watch, is it's kind of like the iceberg effect. You only see like 5% of the
Yeah.
iceberg when they share. So in the closing remarks at the end of the meeting, and there was like no one left in the room because everybody leaves, our vice mayor brought up the YMCA. Now, the YMCA was left in a limbo of the city told them, you go and talk to the school board and the county to determine what the why, because they want $3 million from the city to augment helping them build this $12, $13 million why. And Teresa, in the last 2 minutes of the meeting when they have this closing conversation and no citizens can respond to it, brought up and got approval because she's been in talks with the Y, and the Y wants to put a presentation together to take over our existing water aquatic center and start to run it.
There we go, yeah.
So it was something that was discussed months ago when they did their presentation. And the city's trying to shut down the aquatic center because it is a losing thing, though well used by the citizens here. And I found it ironic that she brought this up and presented it to the city council after no citizen could talk about it.
Well, we have that town meeting with her coming up.
There is
So
a
that'd
town
be a real
meeting
good
coming
time to
on,
bring that up.
if you can figure out how to get yourself registered.
You have to be by link, right? There's a link to click.
The 25th, 5 to 6, I believe, at the community center. The vice mayor will be there in an open town hall to talk and discuss with things that are going on with the city. Great thing, but they require you to go through a third-party registration. And you know how fun it took me probably 10 minutes to go through to figure out how to do it, because you had to tell this third-party group everything about you.
Right, you have to register with that. I thought that was really crazy too.
And I am fighting that at the city level. Their explanation is, well, we need to know how many people are showing, so we need to know how many people have set up,
Size
what
room,
room
yeah.
or whatever. Okay.
They wanna know your age, they wanna know your address.
They want to know where you live. I mean, as far as, yeah, your address, but in what part of the town you live.
I was waiting for them to ask what party are you. They
Oh,
never did though.
No doubt.
I
no
was
doubt.
really waiting.
So anyway,
Well, they got enough of the other information to find out.
Mm-hmm.
just important, exciting things are going on, things are happening.
Yeah, and the Y thing, they're wanting to build a Y without a pool.
No, no,
Which
they're
makes
gonna
sense.
build
They're
a
gonna
20,
put a pool?
yeah, 21 lane swimming
Okay, so
pool.
why does the Y wanna take over the aquatic?
It's not an indoor pool though, right? It's an outdoor pool.
It's
It's
outdoor
covered.
right now, it's
It
not
is covered?
covered yet.
I thought it was
I
outdoor.
I posed the question due to weather and stuff.
Yeah.
So why would they wanna take over the aquatic center?
Well, let me
They're
ask,
gonna build their own pool.
so let me ask you this. If you're a nonprofit and you survive based on donations and use, wouldn't you want to shut down any other pool in the area?
Competition.
Right.
Oh, they wanna run it, shut it down.
Until they shut it down, until they
The
want to run
request
it,
she made-
until they take over
Right.
and their
Right.
facility
So
is
in-
up and running.
To clarify, I want to be very clear, the request she presented to the city council was she was communicating with the YMCA, who are trying to get approval to turn over the managerial staffing, et cetera, of the aquatic center during the construction phase of their pool.
I have a question real quick
the
that
YMCA.
popped into my head. Why is she doing this conversation and not the city manager or the acting city manager?
You know?
That makes no sense to me. Is
So
that
this would be a
job?
great question to ask her, but my understanding is the only purpose of having an open forum city meeting is due to the sunshine law.
Right.
As someone that was running for office, Mark, what they share with the public, how they share the presentations, they've already received those individually. Their staff at each of the council members, from what I understand, have already gotten packets from each of these things. When you're on the board, and I was gonna ask you, wouldn't the YMCA go through the planning board?
I don't know if they have before, but they haven't since I've been on it.
And you've been on it since the whole idea of the YMCA was presented, right,
It
recently?
started before I got on the board.
Okay,
I've just been on the board since, October.
right. So each individual council member has conversations with citizens like you and me. You're welcome to make an appointment, talk to them and meet with them and have concerns. If you're a business or whatever and you want, or they were talking about, like the Humane Society has been aggressively trying to build or have something here in the city, probably not a bad idea, but it's when they can't move forward until they bring it up during one of the city council meetings and talk with each other. Because the Sunshine Law, as I understand it, does not allow them to have a meeting like this amongst themselves and
No.
talk about
being public,
things
right.
without the public being present.
That's correct.
So that is why
I went through
we,
sunshine law class.
well, exactly, so
That's right.
we should all understand how that is affected, because that's the number one violation of issues with elected officials.
Two
Yeah.
things. One, they all do it. Trouble is
Oh,
catching.
Until you catch.
Well, no law is broken until you're caught, right?
Yeah.
If you're speeding at 78 miles an hour down 95, you haven't broken the law until you're caught.
Or school board
Oh,
shenanigans.
78 's not
Sadly.
breaking the law.
Huh?
78 's not breaking the law.
You're not gonna
Nine,
get
you
pulled over.
fine, 10, you mind.
Yeah.
You get 79.
Anyway, that's all I have as far as it.
right.
Again,
So-
we've got meetings next week on Tuesday, an open forum. It's always easy to pull it up on YouTube and watch it. I did speak at the beginning, because during the entire beginning of our meeting, they go up and say the Pledge of Allegiance, then you have a moment of silence, and they jump right in. At no time did any of our council members acknowledge the Minnesota assassination of elected officials. There was never even a breath.
No.
So I took it upon myself, and I walked up there and said, hey, you're an elected official. You're a public. We should take a moment to acknowledge the risk you take, how you put yourself out there, like the people in Minnesota did. So we should take a moment to acknowledge the sacrifice and the risk that we all do when we put ourselves in. And then I flowed into thanking the sheriff for such a great support of our kings, and I could see their eyes rolling in
Susan is
several
gonna
of
be
them.
talking about.
So anyway, I brought that up and applauded the sheriff's department for leaving us alone and letting us do our thing. So,
I just wanted to say, in studying comparative government, the way you did, if you want to see about restrictive zoning laws, study Switzerland. If you think you can build any kind of house you want in Switzerland, you're nuts. They all have to look like a Swiss LA.
yeah.
And Ormond Beach has a Y, so they're an example
Yeah.
how they got that through.
The
Yeah,
land has
that's
one
it.
as well.
Pardon me?
The land has one as well.
Yeah.
The land, okay. Susan?
Yeah, and just what you were saying about the zoning, it's kind of like a aesthetic easement, you know what I mean? Just kind of keeps the peace, you know, you can't get too crazy with that stuff. No, I just wanted to.
Well, Switzerland is like, that's it.
Yeah,
We can't.
No
see
more talk.
Susan.
oh, sorry, I'll move on. And,
Joe?
no, I just, Kathy just said, is there anything you hope that we'll talk about? And I said, I don't know, no kings, you know? I had a great day on Saturday, I rode that high for several days, and listening to the national news was even better.
Yes.
I guess the numbers just keep going up. My dear friend Joanne back there corrected me. So we had, what was it?
13 million?
13.14 million.
Did we
Really?
really make it?
13 million,
I had
yes.
heard beforehand that 12 million was like the number that they felt that we really needed to reach.
And it
So
was,
that's-
it was
that's
up
ter-
13.
3.5%.
That's terrific.
It's
Yeah.
fun too, reading the local news outlets and they're, you know, the other side that seems to be kind of downplaying that number. No, there was really
That's
like
a truth.
200, you know, in Fiber
No,
County.
we had almost
I kind of
600.
heard 11, but okay.
I will tell
Let's
you
don't
that
split hairs.
I was in an emotionally really bad place on Thursday. I was sure that there was going to be an incident in LA that was going to be worse than Kent State. I mean, I was on the phone every half hour just as I knew he wanted to declare martial law. I was just positive it was going to happen. And Saturday, I was so excited to go to the No Kings, and I took my outfit with me to dialysis. I had my poster. I forgot to take my pills. I had a problem when I was there. They had to keep me 45 minutes extra, and when I left, they said, Kathy, go straight home. They said, we don't really want you to drive, but get straight home. So I went straight home. I saw people walking down the Palm Coast Parkway as far as 95 with signs, and I'm honking and waving, you know, and I got home, and I was on pins and needles. I just was, all day I was on pins and needles. Sunday morning I get up, and I looked at my news feed, and tears just rolled down my face. Montana! Can you think of a state redder than Montana? Okay,
Wow.
Tulsa, Oklahoma, Charlottesville, where the Nazis first raised their heads. They had thousands. I know, we had over 1,000. Tampa, Dallas, Texas. I mean, I expected it in places like Chicago and Philadelphia.
Sure.
I wasn't sure about LA. They showed up. They showed up in San Francisco by the millions. I mean, I had given up on the country.
No.
And I'm thrilled. I think we're gonna make it. I really do.
Oh, I'm so
I
glad.
think we are
Doesn't it
gonna
do
make
your
it.
heart good to
Oh, it
know
does.
that hardly anybody showed up at this
It's-
birthday?
I know. And then, to top it off,
Empty
It's not his
stands.
birthday.
Nobody
It's
in the
anniversary of
lawn.
Army.
to
Yeah.
top it off, there was a video on YouTube, and it's a hip hop, and I gotta tell you, two musics I do not listen to are opera and hip hop, okay? I don't like them, don't like rap at all. This is wonderful. It's No Kings. And there's a video that goes with it when it talks about his cabinet of where there isn't a single qualified person. It shows all these rats running toward him. Oh my God, it is incredible. I have played this thing like 2 times on my big television. After I was looking at all of the protesters and all that, I ran to like 3 of my neighbors, like, did you see, you know, because I knew one of them doesn't have a computer, you know. It just gave me hope.
A lot of people were driving by. I saw you guys there, and the honking was incessant at Old Kings and Palm Coast Parkway. The rooms to go guy and the rooms to go truck twice, not once, twice, just laying on the horn. The first time right in front of the other side, and I just was so happy that the people in the cars that were honking, for whatever reason, they couldn't be there, but seeing us there lifted them up. just
Yeah.
like it lifted
It's
you.
good to know we're not alone.
We're
It is
not
so
alone, exactly.
sad.
That's
It's
what I
like,
was gonna
you
say.
do, you start to feel like
Yeah.
you're in a bit of a vacuum in this county.
Yeah.
But a couple of nights ago, Monday night, there was a video on one of the shows, Rachel. I don't know if anybody's saw
Oh
it.
yes, where
The
she go in.
tubas.
Oh,
Did you
yes,
see
the
yeah, I
tubas.
saw that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was
That was
funny.
It was in Tennessee, and it was like it was very long. It was like but Rachel had it like right up to the moment that this stuff happened. Proud Boys here, demonstrators here, and one of the demonstrators actually went up to one of the Proud Boys and started engaging him, you know, cops kind of in the middle, so everybody knew they really couldn't do much, but it was getting heated, right? And about 2 minutes into this, 2 minutes into this discussion,
Trombone
the
and
trombone and the tuba. This guy with the tuba has the tuba like blowing right.
boom.
You can Google it. It's on YouTube, and I had to watch it about 6 times because I was laughing so hard. My husband too. So I was just that's all I wanted to say.
And they
Something
just
that
played
we
the
could hear
tuba and played the
happy.
tuba and played the tuba.
Oh, it kept on,
Evidently
it
they
kept
went
on,
on.
it kept on.
Yeah.
I just wanna-
whatever it takes.
Yeah, I just want to say about Old Kings that the sheriff's department did an amazing job of keeping everybody safe. The protesters were
Amazing.
really great about knowing the boundary. They were told
How to
to
keep themselves
remain
safe.
back, and they did all that. not too much engagement. There was a little bit, but it was quickly put under control, so that it was peaceful, and everybody had the grace to enjoy their rights.
That's right.
And that is what struck me the most,
That's
is
right.
that how everything went so smoothly. People were so cooperative and happy. They were thrilled with the presence of everybody else, that strength that comes
Right.
in numbers,
Yeah.
and the excitement. You actually felt your heart soar.
It was inspiring.
It was
It
wonderful.
was very inspiring.
I just wanted to make sure that it was shared on that.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
since it was so positive, how do we keep the gas going?
Well, they announced the next one for next month already,
Oh,
and,
Yes.
yeah, the 50-51 or the
And
No Kings.
indivisible
Indivisible
flag.
have already
Indivisible
announced it.
flag.
I'm gonna, don't
Because
quote
we
me, I
gotta
think it's the
keep it
17th.
going.
The 17th,
And
yes.
there's 2 or 3 different guidelines or
Yeah, the
understanding or
17th is
goals.
to honor John Lewis. It's the
Yeah, it's called
anniversary
Good
of
Trouble.
his Good Trouble.
They're
It's to
calling it
honor
Good
his
Trouble.
passing.
A Good
You know,
Trouble
he
route.
was just such an amazing inspiration of a person. And I think that's a great thing to celebrate.
Isn't that a stroke of genius, that they're
Yes.
taking these events, not all negative, some of them positive, and we're gonna
Yes.
just do it on that day now?
And
Yes.
that's one of the things that's important. We have to be seen to contribute to our communities in a positive manner,
Yes.
not always protesting, okay? Because I know the PCDC is going to be helping one of the food banks. And
Yes.
I'd really like to see all the other groups that are on that chart in the Democratic office. I'd like to see them all do a major fundraiser for something that everybody loves, like, you know, PBS or the National Public Radio or school lunches, except they waited so long to get school lunches started. I think it's too late for that.
Yeah. But I agree. I like the fact that they're donating their time and their efforts, and they're gonna be organizing around a specific community project to help everybody.
And they were careful
And
to
on that
choose
note, we're
one that
almost at
wasn't
60
religious.
minutes, so we're gonna wrap you
Just
up.
just one thing, since we are still a democracy, how many believe we should bomb that Iranian reactor?
I think we should stick it neutral.
And maybe the only thing I ever agreed with Trump about it, Al and I,
So on that, I heard a really interesting thing on PBS this morning.
yeah.
And a guy was saying, which do you think is more possible and quicker? Building a bomb, delivering a system to put it on a missile, or just buying one from North Korea?
Yeah, buying one from.
Do
North
you
Korea.
believe that all the money and energy that we're doing to take out their development would stop
Gonna stop
North
anything.
Korea from giving Iran a bomb?
Yeah.
It was an interesting concept of the danger is them having one and using it, not how they made it or how they get it. It was a very, it stopped me and I was like, damn. Because this guy, he says, you know,
My mouth works.
nobody prior to 9/11 thought that we could get attacked by our own planes. They didn't build a plane. They didn't buy a plane and outfit it. They just stole it and used it.
And learn how to take off.
So the biggest fear is that
Right.
the use of atomic weapons
And
will
Putin-
be from a terrorist organization smuggling into Subway in New York, not being made by Iran.
And Putin this morning
It was just a
said
thought. It caught me out.
that
I
he would,
didn't perceive
that
it.
if we
Yeah,
bomb, that he'll
I
bomb.
would jump into that, if I was a country, I'd have the bomb. I don't care,
Or do you ever use
I
it?
would have it, because if I don't have it,
You're a victim.
I can't
You don't
defend
have the
myself.
leverage.
So, if I was Iran, I would push forward and get the bomb.
Well, what's,
mean,
I understand that, but Iran is the country that has backed all of these terrorist organizations for the last 20 years and has had very, very insidious. I agree with you 100% on what you said, But just like I think Trump's administration is a little different when you talk about it compared to previous administrations and our courts at this point in time, I think when you talk about countries in the world that want to have a bomb so they can defend themselves, and Iran, it's a false equivalence.
Okay, on that note, if we want to talk about that again, next time, we will. We're past 60 minutes now, so we'll see you next time. Thank you all for tuning in. Please like and share accordingly. We appreciate you stopping by. Thank you all.
This guy was.